What we have here is a pile of 16 books. Some of them are in 2 volumes, so might look like a little more. This was not originally what I was going to make this video about. I went into my garage and I planned to shoot some footage and maybe bring in some hardware for the Atari 800 that was called the ATR 8000, and that is a piece of hardware that allows you to run CP/M software written for the Z80 microprocessor on the Atari. And I also have some disk drives that can hook up to it. I have no idea if it works. A friend of mine was saying that he would like to help me get that running. He lives locally, or semi-locally. And so I was going to work on that and bring it inside. But as I was doing it, I was looking for a book on CP/M that I had. And the reason I have a couple of books on CP/M is here is the Commodore 128 supports CP/M. And while I never ran it because it's like a really slow version of CP/M, because it actually is one of the only, maybe the only version of CP/M that also uses the 6502 to do its I/O, I think is how it works. But I had a Commodore 128 in like 1986 for a few years, and I have fond memories of that. But I went through my collection, which you'll see here in a little bit, and I showed my garage. It's about 15 minutes worth of footage. And what I ended up doing after I made that footage is I was going to pick about 10 books, but I picked way more than 10. And I'm going to show you them here briefly, and then I'm going to maybe pick just a few of them and go through them, I think maybe about a minute or two for each one, and we'll see what we get. So we have here there are 2 volumes. There's another one in here somewhere. Here we go. How to Program the Z80, great book. And I'm going to go through all these really fast here, and then I'm going to focus on them a little more after you see my collection of books that I have in the garage. So How to Program the Z80, games for the Atari, and when I do show them again a little bit later, I will show you when they were written. Commodore 64 User's Guide. Commodore 64 was my first computer. Commodore 64, the games book. My aunt bought me this book, not this copy, but this book in about 1986 for my birthday when I turned 13. Or maybe that was in 85. This is I Am Error. This is about the NES. This is one of the best books written on any hardware platform, I think. So if you get a chance, start looking at some of the platform studies, but move on from there. The Astrocade Basic Manual. This is not my favorite game, but it's among them, Temple of Apshai. Apple Graphics and Arcade Game Design by Jeffrey Stanton. And this was actually not, I'm not an Apple fan actually at all, but he wrote this, and it's got one of my favorite covers of any classic gaming book from that era. I'll show that a little bit better later. He went on to, after he discovered, and this is his words because I met the guy in the early 2000s, after he discovered that the Apple compared to the Atari was not a very good machine, he went on with Dan Peniel to write this Atari Graphics and Arcade Game Design, which is, at the time, was highly regarded by such firms as Electronic Arts. This is a book that hardly anyone has. This is actually a printout that I made for myself and compiled. It's for the Astrocade. It tells you how to program the ins and outs of it using the onboard subroutines. This is an early PC compilation book that has a whole bunch of articles. Really great book on early computing, and also happens to have the source code for TinyDOS, which went on to become the Basic for the Astrocade, and also Level 1 Basic for the TRS-80. The Commodore 128 System Guide, a book that I like because I had the system, and also I think the Commodore 128 is one of the best 8-bit systems ever released. Brian Bagnall wrote, I think, probably the best history of the Commodore, one of the best histories ever for any classic computer system. Great writer. He also wrote a book on the Amiga called The Amiga Years, and if you get a chance, read them both. I think this is the best book on classic gaming, bar none, period. If you read no other, read Racing the Beam. This is one of my favorite books, and it's in a system I don't even really have an appreciation for. It's called Priming the Pump, and this is like kind of an underdog story for the TRS-80. Another great book, and even if you don't care about the TRS-80, but you think classic computing is neat, read that. This is called Pilgrim in the Microworld, and it was written in about, I want to say 83 or 82. I'll say a little bit more later when I get to it. and it's just basically a book about a guy who wasn't into computers and wasn't into computers afterward, and how somehow on the Atari 2600 got, well, at the time, I think it was called the VCS, got completely infatuated with the game Breakout, and it's the entire book is written about that game, basically, and his trying to beat the first level, which I don't think even in the end, and it's a true story, he didn't end up beating, but he was a writer. I don't know what else he wrote, but he got infatuated with that game. He actually got to meet the program at Atari who wrote the game, trying to get hints and tips, because he wanted to beat that first level. I mean, it sounds like a made-up story, but it's true. And finally, I got this book in about 1995, 96. It's the Best Electronics catalog. It's revision 10. It's the last one they ever had. And it is, when I got it, I guess the web was around already, but this was how I ordered most of my stuff. It was not necessarily from Best Electronics, but I mean, it's an amazing piece of work, and I don't know how long it took them, but it took them years, because I have earlier revisions of the Best Electronics catalog, and it's not nearly this complete. All right, so next up we're going to see what I have in my collection. It's going to be some books on my bookshelves, and then afterwards I'm going to focus on a couple of these, and I might give a couple more of them some showing afterward. Before I continue with that, I want to say I'm shooting this under different circumstances, under probably poor light, and that's because my garage is now too cold. It is the day after Thanksgiving, 2020, and that makes it the 27th of November, and there's just a lot of stuff in my garage now. As you'll see in the next video, there's a large fluorescent light, which is underneath that light you'll see that there is lots of boxes, and that was where I was shooting my previous videos, but I decided to make some room so that we can park in the garage because it is now cold, even though I live in New Mexico. All right, up next I will show just a couple of books and maybe the name of each book and when it was written and who wrote it. And in another video, not the next one, but another one, I'm going to focus on maybe 1 or 2 books per video as kind of a segment of each video. Is this a typical garage? Probably so. It's full of many, many boxes. I've got cabinets over here full of tools. Surprisingly, some of it is also full of books. I'm going to give a tour of those one of these days, maybe a little bit today. I mean, there are a lot of cabinets here. Whenever someone comes over and sees the amount of cabinets in this garage, they're pretty surprised. Maybe I'll open them up next and give a quick view. It's kind of dark in here. It's getting to be pretty cold, in the 50s today. I'm going to try to go through some of these boxes in the next few videos. I think I'm going to try to concentrate in this video on the Atari 8-bit line, but we will see what I get done. I'm trying to make a quick video. Today's the day before Thanksgiving 2020, and here's a quick video I'd like to get out before, if I can. There's my 27-inch, 32-inch monitor, or TV. I think it's a 32-inch, 27-inch. I can't remember. I bought it in 2005. It's a Trinitron. It's wonderful. I love that TV. I haven't used it in a while though. Last time I had it hooked up, it was to my my PlayStation 2, and I was playing Dragon Warrior 8. Great game. All these boxes here, the clear back boxes, that's all full of Astrocade material. Yeah, stuff from the Arcadian collection. This is some of my Atari 8-bit system stuff. There's lots of it, and I mean, this is just a fraction of it. There's 10 or 12 more boxes over there, which we can't get to. Most of that's all magazines. And this is after I've thinned out my collection. And yeah, what a weird thing to say. I don't want to thin it out some more. There's only so much I can use. I'm 48 years old. And what have I got? Just a decade or 2 left of life, maybe? Who knows? I say these kind of things to my wife. I was like, why do you say stuff like that? She doesn't really sound like that. By the way, she has a much nicer voice. Alright, so since I am playing this by ear, I'm going to probably make everyone sick by doing what I'm doing. I could probably do this on top of a tripod, but I'm going to not do that because I'm trying to... Alright, this is it's got a whole bunch of books in there, and I'm going to open up a couple of these cabinets and you can see what's inside. Okay, here are those cabinets I guess 4 of them have been opened now. I'm going to give a slight tour of some of the books I have. These are computer books, and this is just a fraction of what I used to have. I've mentioned some of my books before. Some of them I've done close-ups of. I've got some Apple stuff up there. Stretching. I've got some TI stuff here. I've got Timex Sinclair books, and what else? VIC-20, Commodore 64 books. So many things here. Let's open up the cabinet, shed some light in there. Go down here, some of my collecting books. And have I read all of these books? Pretty much. Anything that's like a programming book, I've at least probably skimmed the entire book and briefly read it. Anything that's about collecting or anything like that, I've read from cover to cover. These are some of my favorite books, like the Compute books. I've mentioned a couple of these before. Let's see. Oh gosh. This book here is kind of amusing because you've probably heard of it. It's collectible, or it was one of the first early books on collecting, and the author, we were having this get-together in Las Vegas in 2001 at the Classic Gaming Expo. And the author was there, but I didn't know that, and someone pointed her out, but I didn't realize it was a woman who wrote the book, and so when they pointed to the person she was talking to, and I thought that's who wrote the book. But that was a cool party. That was a California group of us that got together back then, and there were a whole bunch of people who worked on Atari hardware and stuff like that. And I think that was the room, either in 2001, 2001, when Jay Fenton, who worked on the Astrocade, he came up to the room and checked out an Atari, or excuse me, an Astrocade multi-cart that was made by Word Drake, and that was pretty fun. But there's plenty of cool stuff in here. This is the book here that I sent to my buddy Quinn. This is an unusual video, as I said already, because I'm just sort of filming off the cuff here. I don't know what this is going to be. I want to eventually show my ATR 8000, which I might dig out and show in this video. We'll see. Here we are, still looking. I don't know how much these are coming out. I'd like to do this with my garage open, but it's freaking cold, so screw that. Plus, it's dark outside right now. Many books on Atari software. These were compiled by Jeffrey Stanton, who I'll mention sometime. I met him in about 2000. He used to come over once in a while to use my internet. He was into the Amiga scene and the Atari 8-bit scene in the 80s. He was a cool guy. It's weird, I feel like I'm name dropping, but I did know these people. Collectible stuff. Books on my electronics. This is how to build a Z80 computer. I got a whole bunch of books on how to build Z80 computers. You know, how to build a Z80 computer. And when let's talk about building, then I mean putting it together from scratch, from parts that you buy at the store, unless it's the Radio Shack or something. These are going to be parts where you build a computer. Like, I mean, this book you can find online if you wanted to look for it, but it's you build this computer. I got some books on Atari, more stuff here. These are some good recent books. I've gone through most of these. I mean, it's amazing how, I mean, I forget how often I read, but I read pretty often. Let's see what else we got down here. We have more electronics books. Electronics Demystified. This is a great book. If you ever get a chance to read a book on computer history, read The Soul of a New Machine by Tracy Kidder. Early Make magazine. Here's number 1. I don't know if anyone's interested in that kind of stuff, but great magazine. Give it a read if you can. Let's see what else we got here. Going crazy. Got Z80 books on the bottom. Plenty of Z80 books. Forrest Mims classic series on electronics, which I've skimmed, done some of the stuff in there. Many Z80 books. My favorite ones are actually not out here. They're in a house because that's where I use them. Okay, I'm going to be trying to shed some more light here. These are my books on Z80 CPM. I've got a few of them. This was actually made, if you zoom in right there, you see it's for the Xerox 1800 system, and that is a computer part that never actually was released. So I was able to buy those surplus because the computer never came out, even though the discs that came with that version of CPM was for that laptop. Also got down here some interesting books on DOS, old programming books. We've got 2600 best of, great stories in there. You know, we've got the classic book on C, C Programming Language by Kernighan and Ritchie. All right, zoom over to the next one. Oh, here's some great books on math, which I don't know math very well, but these are some, like, that's a great book, yeah. And this guy went on to make the Flight Simulator. Well, in fact, I guess he gets credit for it here already. Some stuff I don't understand. My mother's husband is a mathematician, and he understands all that other stuff. In fact, he's making his own rules for mathematics with a guy in Germany. I don't understand it, but he talks about it with me, and it's pretty fun just to chat about that kind of stuff. All right, let's zip over to the next cabinet. All right, so on top here we have my fiction books. I pretty much don't buy fiction books anymore. If I can't get it from the library, which I can't now because of COVID-19, but I just stop buying books and I get them from the library. And if they don't have them there, if I really want to read it, I get it through interlibrary loan, because books are heavy and I kind of stopped buying them, but not quite. I read them in other ways if I can, or trade for them. So that's fiction. Here's more Atari books that I've got. I think last time I was talking about the action language, maybe some basic XE and things like that. Assembler, 6502 assembler. And I know assembly language to some extent, in Z80, 6502, 68000. Technical reference stuff, the Delray Atari. Got the schematics for the 800XL, some memory maps. I was just saying I'll show you one other neat thing, and that's this book. Probably my favorite funny book ever written. If you get a chance, it's called Christopher Moore's Lamb. Read it. It's the Gospel According to Biff, Christ's childhood friends. Pretty funny. The Swans, they're my favorite band of all time. I love them. I just got a Blu-ray set of them the other day. That's a documentary. Looking forward to watching that in the next few days. Here's some of my textbooks from when I took electronics classes about 13 years ago. Over here in the corner is The Lost Treasures of Infocom, Volume 1. Great book. Hopefully this is in focus. Don't know. If it's not, I guess you won't see this. And if it's only a little bit out of focus, maybe you will. Yeah. Lots and lots of stuff. QBasic. I dig QBasic. I wish it was a little more accessible. What else we got in here? Gardening. Well, yes, I do like to garden. And my math books. Physics. These are more of bookshelves. This is fiction. Might as well show it to you. Probably call this video Books, Books, Books. Got a book here on Joy Division, Flickr, my favorite book of all time. If you get a chance, read it. It's great. If you ever want to read a book that's like a Choose Your Own Adventure but written for adults, read this. It was written a few years ago and it is crazy good. Robotech books, read them all if you can. Blade Runner 2049, great. Blade Runner, not 2049, read it. It's actually called The Android's Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. Got some Isaac Asimov subscription that I had last year. My Philip K. Dick book collection, which is, not too many, but it's I'm getting off the subject of computers, but hey, it's interest. If you're into fantasy or sci-fi, if you're into fantasy, try reading some Phil K. Dick and some other authors I don't have here, like Macon. Those are in the house because they're closer and more important to me. If you ever also get a chance to read someone funny, try this guy out. He's funny. Douglas Adams, I think, once wrote that he's the funniest author ever. And I don't know about that, but he's really funny. Well, that's about it. Yeah, I'm going to show one more thing for books in my cabinets, and then I'm going to just pick out a few and focus on them, and then show a piece of hardware, and that will be it. Something to get uploaded so I can keep up with my buddy Quinn. This shelf here has my Retro Gamer magazines and some of my Retro Gamer DVDs and some Atari newsletters. I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but there are some Atari newsletters that still come out in paper format. This one's called Proc Atari, and I've got a few issues of those. It's pretty good. This one, I think it's still being published. It was stopped for a while, but it's being published again. And yeah, I think I'm mentioning a couple of them here and there. At least one of them. I know they wanted me to put put an article in there, but my friend Chris and I decided not to because they wanted us to cut it down. Here's the Retro Gamer, all of them. So I stopped subscribing to this magazine because, well, it's called Retro Gamer. Basically, if it's newer than 10 years old or older than 10 years old, they it kind of gets in the magazine. And to me, that is not retro. Retro for me, I mean, I guess it is, but I'm not into that kind of retro stuff. It's got to be a little bit newer. And otherwise, I just not interested. And Retro Gamer is published in England, and it's like, I think each issue is like $15 or something. They're pretty expensive, but if you subscribe, you can get a subscription for like $70 for a year. So that's like 12 issues for, you know, way less than cover price. If anyone wants to see my collection a little bit more, if they see something in this collection they'd like me to focus on, let me know, because there's a ton of stuff that I own, and this is just the stuff I'm keeping. I have books behind me in boxes that I'm planning to thin out. And when I say thin out, I mean sell or trade. The first of these books that I'm going to show here are two books about the Atari. They were both written by Jeffrey Stanton. I know Dan worked on this one as well. And the reason I'm bringing these up is because they kind of go hand in hand. This one was written in 1982, and it covers the Apple II computers. This one was published in 1984 and covers the Atari 8-bit computers, specifically the 800, and I think it goes into the XL line as well. This is on the cover. You'll see that this is it's either the 1450 or the 1400 XL system that was never released. I love this cover art. One of these days, maybe I'll scan it in and make myself a poster. I have some posters on my walls of Odyssey 2 games. Not that I like the Odyssey 2, but I just love the cover art for Odyssey 2 games. So I'm going to flip through these really briefly. And there's source code here. I don't know if you can see it too good. There's flowcharts. There's explanations of how the Apple II hardware works. It tells you the math that is required to write on the Apple II, and it's all about 6502 programming. It assumes knowledge of it, and I think the beginning of it actually talks about, is written in BASIC. Yeah, the beginning of it is all BASIC. All right, so next I'm going to show the Atari graphics and arcade game design. And this one doesn't come spiral bound. I spiral bound it because I was using it, and I've actually loaded up all these programs. They're all available on the, I think on Kevin Savitz's website, all the program downloads. And I mentioned a bit that in 2001 I lived in Venice, California, and Jeff was a friend of my wife's father, and her father had passed away, and we moved out there for about a year, and Jeff would come over pretty often. He would use our computer for internet access, and he and I talked about the Amiga. I mean, shortly thereafter, in I think '85, Jeff got an Amiga, and he wrote, if not the first, then one of the first books for the Amiga. It was just basically on Atari, or not Atari DOS, on Amiga DOS. And I have that book around somewhere too. Pretty cool. I have tried to get a hold of him. The last time I spoke to him was in 2005 when my wife passed away. I called him and I let him know what had happened, and obviously he was a little surprised and shocked. Or maybe not obviously, but I forgot that he signed this copy for me. What does he say? Let's see. We'll zoom in. Why not, right? Yeah, okay. Well, I tried to zoom in. That didn't work too good. So this is the what Jeff wrote for my book, for his Atari graphics and arcade game design book. He wrote to Adam. I wrote the textbook on how to program games, Jeff Stanton. And he did. I think in 82, 83, he had a meeting with Trip Hawkins of Electronic Arts, because he wrote this book. And this was apparently used at Atari and also at some other companies on how to program the 5200 and also the Atari 8-bit. This one is Racing the Beam, the Video Computer System by Nick Montfort and Ian Bogost. And this one came out in 2009. What else can I say about it? That's about it. This, like I said earlier, this is one of my favorite ones. This was published by MIT Press. And did I already say who it was by? Nick Montfort and Ian Bogost. Let's see. Well, what I like about this book is, I mean, it's helpful to know a little bit about how the VCS works, but it walks you through it, and you don't have to be someone who knows the hardware to really get it. And on the other side here, we have I Am Error, the Nintendo Family Computer Entertainment System platform, and this was published in 2015. And this one is signed too by someone, well, who didn't help write it, but worked on it. I will talk about that in a moment here. But the NES is not one of my favorite platforms. It does have some of my favorite games on it, like Zelda and some of the Mario games, but I think a lot of the games on that system aren't that good. I'd be disagreed with by most of the 8-bit community. I'm going to show you the inside cover, and then I'm going to move on to some other stuff. Any fan of the NES should pick this book up. It's wonderful. It's written, like I said, in 2015 by Nathan, and it will give you the background on the NES, obviously in America, but also the system as it was released over in Japan first. And I learned so much from this book, and it goes kind of in depth into how the hardware works, which I knew nothing about the NES really, and I learned a lot. I did want to point out one other thing here, which I think is kind of neat. So this continues to be the book I Am Error, and this one is signed by Rachel, and she's the one who did the cover for this. She came to visit New Mexico for a wedding in 2018, and while she was here, we met up at a local restaurant, and we were chatting, and she mentioned that she'd designed the cover for this book. I think that's how it worked. And I was like, really? I have that book. It's pretty good. And she thought I was just an Astrocade fan, but I'm a fan of other systems. And I said, will you sign it? And she was pretty surprised by that. But she did that for me, and she wrote, the NES and Astrocade are fun and cool. July 2018, Rachel. And they are fun and cool. If you get a chance, read the book, look at the art, and play both systems. One of them, the NES, is 6502 based, and the Astrocade is Z80 based. And if the Astrocade interests you, check out some of the other videos on my channel. I've got lots of them based on around that system. What we have here is the Commodore 64 User's Guide, written by Commodore. Came out in 1982, I believe. And I don't know who wrote it, and it probably doesn't say here, although that's probably available online very easily. This is the 7th printing, first edition, from 1983. And the reason I'm showing you this, and all of these books actually, is I would say randomly, but not really, I picked out some of my favorite books for my collection. And you've already seen my collection, so you saw how many books I have. So you know that these books mean something to me. This means something to me because it's the first computer I ever had. I got it in about 1984 or so, when I was in 6th grade. I saved that money for it, bought myself the computer. I'd saved up to about $200, and my parents bought me a disk drive and a printer and a 13-inch TV, which color TV, which I used with this one. Previously, I'd had a Atari 2600 and I used it with a black and white TV. And I sold that 2600 with my 6 games that I had, or my mom sold them, at a yard sale in 1984 for $20. So whoever got that got a steal, because I did not want to sell it for $20. I wanted $20 for each game or something, which I never would have gotten probably, but she thought I meant all of it. So when she came home, she gave me $20, and I thought I sold one game. And nope, I sold the whole system, or she sold the whole system at my grandmother's yard sale. So if you're out there and you got 6 games that belong to me, be thankful for that. Next, I have the Temple of Apshai trilogy, one of my favorite games for all classic systems. This is the trilogy that was re-released in 1985, and this is the command card for the Atari and C64. I bought this game for about $8 in I'd say 88 or 89 over Christmas break at a mall, and it wasn't really in a discount section. It was kind of in a re-release section, and everything there was like $8, and everything else in the store was full price. So I think I got this and maybe Geos, however you want to say it. Geos was $50, and I never really learned to like that program. People look back on it and think it was so groundbreaking, but if you actually used it without a RAM expansion, you would not think it was groundbreaking. It was slower than hell. The reason I like this game is because of the descriptions in it. I've talked about this a little bit in previous episodes, but I'll just, this is level 1 of, what level? Let's see. Temple of Apshai Monsters. Level 1 room, level 1 rooms. I'll just read the Room 55 is a rough stone cave, save for the smoothly carved north wall. Dust covers the floor of the room, several inches thick, and cobwebs hang from the ceiling and fill every crack of the floor and walls. A small box is visible in the dust in the southwest corner. If you are like me and you ever played D&D and then you discovered this game, you were like, this is RPGs. These are two of my favorite books for the Bally Arcade, Astrocade. This is the basic manual for the re-release of Bally Basic. Came out in 1981. And it's, I think, one of the best manuals that ever came with any of the basics for the classic systems. It tells you how to use music and make music and stuff like that. I mean, many of them did. The Apple is very famous for having good manuals, but this one came with a game system, but really it let you program in BASIC. And of course you could play games on the system as well. And the re-release of it adds some improvements. And this is, as I said earlier, this came out in 1977, although came out isn't quite right. It's 1987 copyright, or 1978 copyright, but this was not available to most people, although if you were a member of the Arcadian or a subscriber, you could write to the Arcadian and spend, I think it was $20 or $25, and they would send you a photocopy of this book. Of course, now you can just download off the internet, and the original photocopies all had like something that says "Do not photocopy" right here. It was on every single page in large print, and that was even on my, because I have the original copy of this book too, and that's written in red on every page. And if you photocopy it, it shows up and blots out all this stuff. But I used Photoshop, and I was able to get all that out of there, which thankfully that's good. Although even in like 20 years ago, almost by now, members of the Astrocade discussion group got together, and we all worked on this and typed in the source code for the ROM, the 8K ROM, which is about 200 pages of source code. But this explains how to use the Astrocade's onboard ROM subroutines in cartridges, 4 cartridges, and also if you want, you can kind of go through tricks and hacks to be able to use them in BASIC. What else we got here for my books? This is actually a 1-volume book. It's all much larger than this. It's twice as thick. So it's this thick normally, which is unwieldy. So I took this and gave it a new cover and placed it in this the binding. So this is how to program the Z80. This is the chip that's inside the Bally Astrocade, and this part of the book is like this book right here is basically stuck in the middle here and makes no sense. This is the reference, and it should be at the back of the book or separately, which is what I did. So this tells you explains how to program the Z80 chip, and this is the reference manual. I use this reference manual basically whenever I program for the Astrocade, which is not too infrequently. I was just programming it or disassembling a program called Life just a few days ago. This explains how to use like every single opcode, and doesn't explain at all how to use them, but it tells you how to make them work. I guess when I say how to use them, it does explain how to use them perfectly. It doesn't tell you how to use them in your code to program. This part of the book does. But really, once you've gone through this, you don't need that part anymore. So I use this book. I use that book and the last book called Software and Hardware for the Bally Arcade, known as the Nutting Manual, and that's how I do my programming on the Astrocade, or at least go through the programs and disassemble them. Let's move on. Some of my favorite books of my computer collection are for the Atari home computers. This one, I don't think it's that great of a book, but I have fondness for it because in about 1994 or so, I bought some books from American Technovision when they were like kind of closing out their selling of stuff, and I got this for basically nothing. I think this was published overseas in England. I guess I could look. In about let's see. I should do this off camera, but why not go through the book with me, right? It says it doesn't say where it was published, doesn't say when it was published, but I guess it was published in Germany? Oh, published in May 1982, first edition, first printing. The reason I'm showing this book here is because I got this book, and I already had some books, but I was into artillery duel games, and I actually already had used an Astrocade, and I liked artillery duel games, and I liked one on the Apple that I played in the mid-80s. So I'm going to close the book, and I'm going to show you. This is the first long program that I typed in myself for the Atari. So it's one page. So it starts on page 55 and goes up to page. So I typed all this in. It's not too long. I mean, well, if you've never typed in a program, it's going to seem long to you, but it's sort of what, 6 pages. So that's the end of it there. It's not a bad program actually. I had a lot of fun with it. for me, part of it was typing in a program so that I could learn how BASIC worked on the Atari. And now we're going to get to some Commodore books and some books that aren't exactly just about any specific computer, and a catalog. In about 1985 or 86, it was around the time when the Nintendo was released in America in the 2 markets, and one of them was New York City. I wanted a Commodore 128, and my dad brought me to Crazy Eddie, and he had seen some commercials on TV, and he knew I liked video games, for the Nintendo, and he wanted to buy me a Nintendo. I wanted a Commodore 128, so he was like, "Oh, look at these games! They come on cartridge, blah blah blah." And I think that, I don't know how many games were released for the NES, but they were just a quote black box games at the time, and so I had a choice between getting a Commodore 128 and getting a NES, and I'm really glad I went with the 128. I mean, later on, I used the 128 so much more than I would have used the NES, and I eventually got an NES in the late, about 89 or 1990, and got some cartridges for it, obviously, and went on to collect for it for a bit. But this Commodore 128, I'd already had a Commodore 64. I think I replaced it because it died. I had bad luck with Commodores. I used to have to get them fixed. There's the I/O chip inside of it called, what do people call it? The CIA chip. Used to always get fried on me, and I later found out it's because you touch the joystick port, then you, which is right near the power supply, you send a static shock right down into the CPU or into the I/O chip, and it kills it. And since I live in New Mexico, that's a big problem. But this book is the book. I mean, it's also one of the best books ever written, but it includes more than just BASIC. It also includes how to use CP/M for the system, how to use BASIC 7.0, which is, I think, the best BASIC release that was included with a computer, and it was in the ROM. And it also has some colored pictures in the middle. One of them is amusing, if I can find it here. It'd be kind of funny to show off, because it shows a guy using this Commodore 128 on the go, and none of these people have it hooked up to a... yeah, there he is. See if you can see that guy. But he's walking through campus, and he's got 128 tucked under his arm. How is he using it? It doesn't have his power supply, doesn't have a joystick, doesn't have a monitor, doesn't have a monitor cable, but he has a computer. Get a chance, even if you don't own a 128 or have no interest in Commodore, take a look at this manual. So well written. This book here is, maybe I'll get this one out of the way. This is a book I got for my 13th birthday, I believe, and it's just a bunch of programs that you can type in. My aunt bought this for me. I had asked for some books, and she got me this. And the next year, because I didn't even ask, she got me a whole bunch of software for the Commodore 64. And I typed in a few programs under here, and I almost, since I brought out this book a couple days ago, and yesterday was Thanksgiving, I almost loaded this program up. It's called, can you see here? It's called Thanksgiving. It's called Turkey, and you basically have a spread at the bottom, spread at the top, and the point is you just have to make sure the sprite doesn't fall down to the bottom, or the turkey. This book taught me quite a bit about the Commodore 64, not because it teaches anything, because when you're typing in the programs, one of the things it does, it talks about the program structure, which, I mean, most programs most books that you got with that had program listings did not, for one, tell you how the program structure worked, and two, didn't have a checksum. And look how short this program is. It's very short. The checksum, so you type in the program, and in this one I can't remember how the checksum worked, but you will either you type in the whole program and then you ran this through a checksum program, and you compare to make sure that all the checksums were correct, or it might have worked like the one that was for compute programs where it would show it on the screen as you typed it, but I don't remember. But either way, I typed in some books from here, or some programs from here, and had a good time doing that. And it was very influential on me and how I learned to enjoy just using BASIC. And I still use BASIC on and off now and then. It's a fun language to use. Is it fast? Nope. Is it made for programming games? Nope. Did people program thousands of games in BASIC anyway? Yep. So give some BASIC programs a try, because you might be surprised. They might not be fast, they might not be smooth, but many of them are fun. This book was part of the Bob Fabris collection, and it was I split that collection when I bought it for the Astrocade with a friend of mine, and he got this in his collection, and years later I found out that he had it, and I asked if I could borrow it, and he just gave it to me. This is PCC's Reference Guide, Personal and Home Computers. It was published in July 1977. It is an early book, very, very early. The book is interesting in many respects. I don't think it's available online. Just the only part of it that I've seen available is part that I scanned in here, and this is the source code, which was freely available even back then. and I will show you what it is. The inside of this book on page 58 has Poly Alto Tiny Basic version 3, which I think the last version written for the 8080, and it was by Li-Chen Wang, and this was written in an attempt to make it so that Microsoft Basic, which was not freely distributable, would have an alternative that was freely distributable. This will work on any system that has just 2K of RAM, so this is a perfect reason why this was ported over to the Bally Astrocade, which had 4K of RAM but only 1.8K of RAM available to BASIC. And if you take a look here, and you can find this online, it's been scanned, it's actually available on my website, it's freely distributable, even, like I said, 43 years ago. So it explains how to use it, but even better, it has a complete source code with comments for the exact version of BASIC here. And this was printed out on April 26, 1977. And this is written in 8080. I'm not sure how many people are aware of this, but the 8080 mnemonics won't work exactly with the Z80, but the code will. So if you have an 8080 program, I mean, it has to be written so that it understands your hardware, but it will run on under a Z80. So you can use a Z80 to run 8080 software, which of course was done on purpose. That couldn't have happened by accident. So this explains how the program works, and this was later ported to Bally Basic, or is the port of Bally Basic. Bally Basic is an extension of Tiny Basic. And there's, I'm surprised, I actually started a thread on Atari once asking if there was ever a version of Tiny Basic written for the Atari, but there wasn't. I guess because originally it was written for the 8080. Although I guess in like 1979, 1980, something like that, someone did make a port for the 6502, which you can find online, but I don't know what 65 processors it runs on. Yeah, so that's Tiny Basic, and I love the fact that it was made to be freely distributable. I hope that I'm preaching to the choir here. I hope that everyone who is into Atari 8-bit computers, Atari 2600, Atari 5200, Atari 7800, owns this. If you don't own this, find a way to get it. It came out in about 1995 or 96, something like that. I mean, I first started hearing about it around that time, and I wanted a copy. I think I had to pay $10 or $15 for it. It's actually a catalog of everything that Best Electronics was selling at the time. Best Electronics is still in business. You can still buy stuff from them, and they still sell many of the items in this catalog, but many of them are also sold out by now. And the reason I know that they're sold out is even when I bought this, which was in about, like I said, 96, at the latest, I bought this in 97, they would start sending me updates in the mail. And this is an update they sent me, because I guess I was on their list. So this is an update from April 5th, 2008. So I don't know if you can download these on their website or not, but this was sent to me in the mail. So it tells you what is sold out mostly, or prices that have changed. So if you've ever been to the Best Electronics website, you'll know that it is hard to use. And a friend of mine, he actually uses that as an example of how a website shouldn't look and and shouldn't be set up. But it is an old website from the mid-90s, and I think it was originally written on either the Atari 8-bit or the Atari ST or something like that, and it's pure HTML. And it's probably been updated since then, but its origins back then, basically the same as my Bally Alley website. I would never pick on Best Electronics for their website, because my Bally Alley website is really no better. It's an enjoyable read. If Best Electronics still sells these, please buy it. If they don't sell it, it would be great if they had a PDF available of it so everyone could read it. This book has not just, I'm just going to open up to a random page here. The best trackball. This is some equipment you could buy for your ST, and it wasn't just for the ST, but once you got this book, you were on their mailing list, and you wanted to be on Best Electronics mailing list because they would send you random pieces of information in the mail. Like I remember one time I got this is probably about 1997, I got an envelope in the mail from Best Electronics, which wasn't unusual. They sent out updates pretty often. And this update said it was just basically a list of 5200 games, and they found a crate in their warehouse that had some really rare 5200 games, which they were selling for between $10 and $15 each or something like that. And nowadays, they were some of the rarest games there were. And, they were selling them cheaply. And I was like, I don't want these games. The 5200 was something I had so many troubles with. I'd had I mean, I actually sent off my 5200 joysticks in about 1993 or 94 to Best Electronics to be repaired. They repaired them, sent it back. They worked for a while, then they died. That is the way it is if you're a 5200 fan, which I am a fan of the hardware, not of the joysticks. Yeah, pick up this catalog if you can get it. Hopefully it's still available. Brad over there is a great guy. I've called him on many occasions to order stuff. He still does orders by phone. These are the last 3 books I'm going to talk about. I'm actually going to focus on each one individually. But the reason I want to focus on these 3 books is because this one was written in 1983. This one, well, or published in 1983. This one was published in 2006, and this one was published in 2007. They are each some of the best books on their particular platform. This one focuses on the Atari VCS. This one obviously on the Commodore, and this one on the TRS-80. I also feel that they each have a unique thing to say. This talks about something that you don't hear about too much, the TRS-80. This is just I don't know if it's a unique thing to say, but he does it very well. And Brian eventually wrote an Amiga book. I talked about this a little bit earlier in the video. And this book is just on the Atari and, well, really it's on Breakout. I read this book because it was recommended and I got it through an interlibrary loan. I had a hard time finding this book. You can find it now. If you're into classic computers, buy this book, buy this book, buy this book. If you don't buy any of the other books I've shown earlier, buy these 3. If you don't buy any of the books I talked about earlier, including these 3, buy this one. If you don't buy any of the books I've shown in this video, still buy this one. Get it from the library. It's definitely available through interlibrary loans if you have those available at your library, because I've gotten it twice from the interlibrary loans because I try not to buy books too much anymore, which I also talked about earlier while I was showing my bookcase. But I eventually bought this. In fact, lately I've written notes on when I buy books. When did I buy this one? I bought this book in February 2019, so almost 2 years ago, and I reread it, and I think that anyone would enjoy reading this book. So I'm going to show it next. This is the one book I think every fan of classic gaming should buy, or at least read. You don't need to buy it. It's called Pilgrim in the Microworld, I, Mind, and The Essence of Video Skill by David Sudnow. It was published in 1983, and I'm not familiar with his other books, but it is contemporary to the video game, and when people were just getting into I guess it was contemporary to the first generation, second generation. I don't know how they can call what they call these, but it's the VCS era, and he only plays basically Breakout, and he doesn't ever beat the first level, and so he has a really hard time, and he tries to explain how the game works. But what is basically, it's someone who is in love with one video game, doesn't know anything really about the video game industry, describing to someone who may not know anything about video games or the video game industry, Breakout. I mean, I haven't actually reread it since I bought the book. I skimmed it, and he is a great writer, and sometimes when I'm reading it, I just want to, this man he's passed on. I don't know when he died, but I remember reading he had. But his writing style makes you want two things. It makes you want to strangle him, because you're like, how can you not understand how to play Breakout and do better than you're doing? But it makes you want to hug him, because he's trying so hard to wrap his brain around how Breakout works. And if you were in 1983 didn't understand how to play Breakout, well, I'm sorry to say I wouldn't understand you. But would you have had the gall to call up Atari and set up a meeting with a programmer to understand how the game works? Well, probably not. Even at the time in 1983, this game was considered old. And he talks about that as well. So he first encountered the game Breakout at a party, and he wrote a book about it. So read the book, read the book, read the book. This one is called Priming the Pump: How the TRS-80 Enthusiast Helped Spark the PC Revolution, the True Story of the Microcomputer Pioneers. It is written by David Welsh and Teresa Welsh. What I like about this book is it's written by two people who were hands-on in the computer era. And David, I believe, is the one who purchased his computer and wrote a whole bunch of software, including, I think, a word processor. It's been about 12 years since I read this book. Now that I brought it out again, I think I need to reread it. But I just wanted to recommend that fans of any platform should read this book. And there are many, many, many good computer books out there, including in my garage, which I would recommend. But these 16 books, and there's only one more book to show you, are the tippity top, tippity top. Read them if you can. This one was published in 2007, and at that time, when I read it, I was so delighted with the book because it talks about the hardware aspect, and David talks about, if I'm remembering this correctly, how his introduction to the computer was through hardware, and in 1977-ish, I mean, don't quote me on this, read the book, he picked up the original TRS-80 Model 1 because he wanted to get his hands on a real computer, like many people did at the time. So he picked one up and then worked around all the computer's limitations and was able to make a word processor that could do upper and lower case, even though the computer could only really show uppercase, and many other interesting tidbits. I liked the computer so much I wrote to the authors and I gave them a rave review, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but I basically said, you know, this is a book on the computing history that you don't hear. You hear all about Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and so many other people in the computer industry. Some of the unsung heroes, like for instance the people behind CP/M, you hear about them a bit, but not too much. This is a system you don't hear a lot about. Now that podcasts are around, you hear some more about specifically this one. But love this book. Now that I'm talking about it, I've talked myself into reading it again. This one does have more pictures than many of the other ones. Has ads. You don't see too many here, but there are ads, which is great. And some of them are, now that I actually listened to a podcast on the system, I could probably read this again and understand a lot more about it, because when I read this, TRS-80 was pretty foreign to me, except I knew about the Z80 because of the Astrocade. All right, one more book to show, and then I want to close out, and next time you're going to see some hardware on the Atari 800, ATR 8000, or it's actually for any of the systems. So right now, you're either shaking your head back and forth saying, Adam talks too fast. Why is he going through these books so quickly? It's because I don't have time to go through them all and make a video that's short, and I'm not going to go and spend a lot of time on each one. I just want you to read them. If you consider yourself a computer history buff, read any of these books in this, any of them, even the catalog. Just get the Best Electronics catalog. This one is for fans of the Commodore. Yes, absolutely. Is it for fans of Atari? No. Should fans of Atari read it? Yes. The Commodore 64 was kind of the Atari 8-bit's biggest competitor, and I don't even remember if this book goes into that. This book came out in 2007. I read it at the time when it was new. I think this book actually had a previous title before this. Maybe not, or maybe this is the old title. I can't remember. But it was published in 2007 by Brian Bagnall, who went on to write a book on the Amiga, which is also great. And I actually had 2 copies of those because my wife knew I liked the Amiga, and I bought a copy for myself. And then for Christmas one year, the same year it came out, she bought me a copy of that book. But this book goes behind the scenes of the VIC-20, the Commodore 64, the Plus 4, maybe the 128, and it doesn't cover the Amiga, and it's not really, I take that back. It covers it really quickly, and which is all it's supposed to do, because he knew at the time when he wrote this book he was going to write a book on the Amiga, and he basically says, if you want to know more about the Amiga, hold up, I'm going to be publishing a book soon, which he did publish a book, but it took a long time to come out. So that's it. Those are the 17 books out of my collection of many dozens, maybe a couple hundred books that you saw on the bookshelves that I would recommend you picking up first. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. Next up, like I said, I'm going to cover the ATR 8000 briefly, and maybe do a video on the Astrocade. All right, enjoy. Bye-bye for now. Anyway, now is that a threat?